In the cool comfort of the insect's body, the protozoa reproduces. As it multiplies, it constantly creates new mutations of itself, each genetically different from the other. It was this that would defeat us. For it was only a matter of time until the parasite evolved into a new form that could recognize and resist the drugs. And then the resistant parasite inside the mosquito spread across the world.
Unfortunately, beginning in Colombia and in Thailand in the late 1950s and early 1960s, resistance to chloroquine began to develop. Resistance has now spread essentially over the entire globe. The drug, which was the best drug that we ever had for malaria, is almost useless in most places. What we have found is that as soon as we develop a new drug, the parasite, this incredibly complex infectious agent, learns how to become resistant to that drug.
As each drug failed, a new one replaced it, and failed even quicker. There was a fatal flaw with all of them. All the molecules were chemically almost identical. They were all based on the same original quinine molecule. And parasites that could recognize one molecule could recognize them all.
At the end of the 1970s, we got very much worried at the WHO steering committee that we had no other drugs which could be recommended once resistance had been developed. And we were eagerly looking for something entirely new, something novel.
We were running out of drugs. We were very anxious to find new antimalarials. And so anything which looked promising was of interest.
By the end of the 1970s, scientists were desperate for something to beat this parasite. What was needed was a new molecule, something so different that the parasite couldn't recognize it. Unbeknownst to the rest of the world, the molecule had already been found. It was to come from a country that had never produced an anti-malarial drug before, in one of the darkest periods of its history. The drug would prove to be spectacularly effective, but for 30 years, while millions died, it was caught in a web of intrigue. Almost defeated this time not by the mosquito or the parasite, but by human nature itself.
During the Cultural Revolution, there was a very big anti-intellectual campaign. Intellectuals, professors, physicians, and scientists were suddenly considered counter-revolutionary. They were forced to leave their homes and take very low prestige jobs in the countryside, shoveling manure or helping with the harvest.
In 1967, in the middle of the Cultural Revolution, Dr. Ying Li joined a group of young scientists who had answered a call from Chairman Mao himself to solve the problem of malaria.
我们呢，虽然我们还是有时间搞科研的，但是呢，我们也花了好多时间，要唱歌，要读毛主席语录，要开会搞批判，所以呢，我们也这个工作效率也不是很高的。
Mao considered everything Western to be decadent, including medicine. So instead, the scientists looked to the Chinese past for inspiration. For thousands of years, herbs have played a key role in Chinese medicine. But when Ying Li and her colleagues began their search, hardly any of the plants had been properly investigated. They worked their way through 200 herbs which had traditionally been used against malaria fevers. None worked. Then, finally, they tried one called Qing Hao from the plant Artemisia. Ying Li and her colleagues followed an ancient recipe, 2,000 years old, for making a kind of tea that claimed to cure malaria. They distilled the tea and added chemicals to refine it until they had isolated the active compound. Then they made a drug which they tried out on patients dying from malaria. The results were astonishing. It cleared the blood of malaria parasites quicker than any drug in history. The effect on the patients was remarkable.
我们很多临床的医生就守候在这个病人的身边，等他醒来。所以等到看到他醒过来的时候，那个高兴的心情是无法形容的，因为我们把病人从死亡的边缘拖回来了。
The Chinese had discovered what the whole scientific community had been hoping for, a completely new and powerful drug against malaria. They continued to test it, refine it, perfect it. But it was years before they would tell anyone else it even existed.
By the time it was published in English, it was really probably 10 years after most of the work was done. Much of the work came out in '79, and a large series of papers came out in 1982 in English. And these reported things that had been done a long time ago.
I think I was working in eastern Thailand at the time, and we got a photocopy of an article in a Chinese medical journal, which was extraordinary. It described the discovery or rediscovery of a plant-derived medicine. It described the evaluation of this in the laboratory to show that it had anti-malarial activity, the structure, the chemical structure, and then actual clinical trials with this new compound, which suggested that it was a very active anti-malarial. It just sounded extraordinary.
There was something else about Qing Hao Su. The Chinese claimed the molecule of the drug was completely different from any other anti-malarial. It was so new, the malaria parasite wouldn't be resistant to it. But it was also so new they couldn't fathom how it worked. And so strange that many Western scientists were skeptical that it worked at all.
It's a beautiful molecule to look at, and it caught the attention of many, many people. It had this strange peroxide group, 2 oxygen attached to each other. And we never have seen in medicinal chemistry something useful from this type of compounds.
Well, no one had ever seen a molecule like Qing Hao Su before. It contains something called an endoperoxide. Endoperoxide means 2 oxygens. And previously, almost every endoperoxide that had been found was unstable. It's a compound that could fall apart in exposure to air. And here they were claiming to have a drug that was stable and could be made into a drug and would last in the body. The general feeling was this compound couldn't possibly last long enough in the body to have an active effect.
People thought, well, this is just a medicine man that's working his art, and who knows whether or not it really did cure malaria.
What you have to understand is that prior to this, a lot of things that had been published in the Chinese literature were just rubbish. For example, they had claimed that they had eradicated another tropical disease called schistosomiasis, when in fact they hadn't. There was another claim that they could cure malaria with acupuncture. And there was even a claim by someone that he could meditate and get DNA to twist on itself.
Western scientists were keen to investigate the Chinese claims.